Today, there is not a single country in the world without debt. The United States debt has surpassed $38 trillion. Europe, Japan, China, Germany, all of them are in debt. Even oil-rich countries are. Naturally, one question comes to mind. If everyone is in debt, who is going to collect this money? The answer is actually stranger than we think, because the world, to a large extent, is in debt to itself. Debt is usually described as something bad, but in the modern world, debt is almost the system itself. Wars, crises, economic growth, all of them have been driven by debt in one way or another. Without debt, today's world would not exist. This story doesn't begin with modern banks. It begins in the 1600s, when England ran out of money while fighting France. The king borrowed from merchants and said to them, "I will pay you regular interest through taxes." To manage this, the Bank of England was established. This was a major turning point. For the first time, the state began spending money it had not yet earned. In return, it offered only a promise, a bond. But that promise was so strong that it could be bought and sold. Over time, everyone did the same. France, the Netherlands, the United States. National debt was no longer a source of shame, but a sign of trust. If you could borrow, it meant you were trusted. Fast forward to today, and debt has become almost the main fuel of the world. Every country borrows, every bank lends, and ordinary people like us are a part of this system too. Our pension funds, savings, and taxes, all of them are pieces of this cycle. Take the United States as an example. Most of its $38 trillion in debt is owed to Americans themselves, banks, pension funds, investment funds. In other words, the U.S. is largely in debt to itself. Yes, countries like China and Japan do hold U.S. Treasury bonds, but this represents only a small portion of the total debt. The U.S. is in debt to China sounds dramatic, but it's only a small part of the reality. In fact, the whole world works this way. Countries lend to one another, and then that money circulates through different channels and eventually comes back. The IMF, the World Bank, central banks, everyone holds someone else's IOU. There is only one condition that keeps this system alive. Everyone has to keep believing in it. Central banks sit at the very heart of this system. When they buy bonds, they create new money in return. That means every unit of money in circulation is tied to some form of debt. There is no such thing as debt-free money. So will these debts ever be paid off? Short answer, no. Governments don't think about debt the way individuals do. For them, debt is not something to be fully repaid, but a constantly renewed agreement. Old debts are rolled over with new ones. What really matters is that interest continues to be paid. That's why Japan has carried extremely high debt for years without causing panic. The system is still functioning, trust is still there. But when trust disappears, things fall apart quickly. We've seen this in Greece, Argentina, and Sri Lanka. When the money runs out and debts can't be paid, it's usually the public that pays the price. Austerity, unemployment, rising living costs. And here's the hardest part. When people say we owe the debt to ourselves, that isn't entirely true, because interest payments don't flow evenly. They usually flow upward to those who hold the debt. So debt isn't just a transfer between countries, it's also a transfer between people. That's why as debt grows, inequality grows with it. There is no single villain here, not China, not the United States, not banks alone. We are all inside this system. We are both debtors and creditors. Debt once meant bondage. Today, it means balance. But like any balance, it can break. And if trust ever completely disappears, we'll be reminded of what debt really is, a promise that keeps being postponed.